You do not forget the Lord your God, failing to observe his commands, his laws, and his decrees that I am giving you this day. Otherwise, when you eat and are satisfied, when you build fine houses and settle down, and when your herds and flocks grow large, and your silver and gold increase, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart will become proud, and you will forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. He led you through the vast and dreadful wilderness, that thirsty and waterless land with its venomous snakes and scorpions. He brought you water out of hard rock. He gave you manna to eat in the wilderness, something your ancestors had never known, to humble and test you, so that in the end it might go well with you. You may say to yourself, "My power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me." But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms his covenant that he swore to your ancestors as it is today. If you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and worship and bow down to them, I testify against you today that you will surely be destroyed, like the nations the Lord destroyed before you. So you will be destroyed for not obeying the Lord your God. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. If there's anyone here this morning who's never had the pleasure of meeting me, my name is Malk, and that's all I'm telling you this morning. Can we pray? Heavenly Father, you know everything about us, our need and our greed. I pray today that you will speak into our lives and hearts, that we may grow closer to you. Amen. We're going to be knocking about a few generations this morning, but I want to start back in 1962, when I left Wortley County School to start my life in the building trade as an apprentice plumber. One of the first things I was told when I started work was this: when you start a job, make sure that the foundation is right. No matter what job you do, whether it's plumbing, whether it's joinery, start it right. It's got to be level. It's got to have a strong base. If it doesn't, you'll soon be in trouble. If you wander off it, you'll probably be even more trouble. And so that's the first thing I want us to remember this morning. Foundation. Foundations. In our reading this morning, we've heard a warning from Moses to the nation of Israel. God had used Moses as his cornerstone, if you like, as his foundation in that time, as his representative, which to use him to set the Jews free from slavery in Egypt. Brought across the sea, plagues, many things to set the Jews free. And then there was the great walk to the promised land, 40 years with fire at night, with a cloud in the morning to guide them, with food provided. And the one thing that has always intrigued me is, what's the flavour of manna? Does anybody know? Did it come like crisps where you could choose it? I don't know, but it's something that has always bugged the back of my mind. But he kept them fed. And they came to the edge of the promised land, just as he'd promised. There they were at the edge, and what do? Typical. We're not going in there. That's a bit too rough for us. Look at the size of them. Look at the army they've got. There's no chance. And so God said to Moses, okay, they don't want to go in. They don't have to go in. We'll go on another walk. another 40 years till the whole of this generation has died out. And the reading we have this morning is at the end, towards the end of that 40 years of the second generation of the Exodus from Egypt. And thankfully, Moses, a bit like most Yorkshiremen, doesn't mince his words in the reading we've had this morning. He says, when you enter this land, don't you dare forget God. Don't you dare forget God. I've added the dare, by the way, it sounded a bit better. When you're prosperous, when you've got more than you could ever dream of, when you've got your new farm and your lovely farmhouse, when you've got all your animals, when you've got your business, as you prosper, don't you ever forget God. Don't you forget the one who actually delivered you through the dangerous wilderness. It was God who gave you the power to gain this wealth that you enjoy today. Remember his agreement with your ancestors. If you forget God and turn to other gods, whether that be a sheep or a flock or a house in those days, don't you forget. Don't you ever forget. It was God who brought you to this point. Moses knew his time was almost up. He wasn't going to go into the promised land. They wouldn't have him to turn to in the future. New leaders would rise and fall, but they must remember the one thing. Don't you ever forget God, the one who put the foundation in place, the one who had this land ready for you, the one who was to provide for you. And this reading this morning reminds me very much of that old saying, which I've probably used up here dozens of times, but you'll have heard it anyway. The more things change, the more they stay the same. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Down the centuries, how often have God's people turned from him? Turned from him being the foundation. How many times have they done that? If not turned away, they've tried to do his work in their strength. How often have we seen this happen? As many as you know, I love looking at history. No, I can't remember it all. But I love, in particular, the history of this area of Owlerton. Because I was born in Owlerton, not Hillsborough, Owlerton. Remember, Hillsborough's in Owlerton, not the other way around. I was born here. And even though I never came to church as a child, it was always drummed into me that this was my church. I lived a few hundred yards up the road, never came in. I don't think I entered this church until I was about 23, 24. But this was my church. This was where I should belong. And if you can remember, 2 years ago was the 150th anniversary of St. John's, and I looked at some of the history, and then it was taken over by my daughter, thank goodness, because it made it so much better. And the history of the church just captivated me. And even today, there are things coming up that I didn't find 2 years ago. Did you know that there used to be a healing spa well in Owlerton that thousands of people used to come to and take of the waters? There is a report that some of them used to take it home in bucketfuls. You didn't know that, did you? And it wasn't from the river. There was a healing well in Owlerton. One of the things I did learn, though, when we were preparing for the 150th anniversary, is that a gentleman called Montague Burgoyne gave this piece of land for the church. And so he lived in London. Gave him 2 votes, by the way. He lived in London, he got a vote there because he owned land here, he got a vote here. Can't be bad, can it? You could buy it for anybody you like, both of them. But he was invited to come and lay the foundation stone of St. John's. They gave him a silver trowel. It's not bad. I don't know whether he took it away with him, probably, but it was a solid silver trowel to lay this stone. And it probably said, to the glory of God, as these things do, on that stone when he laid it. And upon that foundation stone was to build this building to the glory of God and for God's work to flourish in this area. Why here? Why build a church in this area? Well, if you remember, just 8 years previously, there'd been the Great Flood of Sheffield, where the Deut Dam up above Bradfield swept through this area and killed many people. I think somewhere in the region of 250. And there is one article I read which actually said, after Owlerton, no more died. But that was wrong, because some did die round about Kelham Island. And so maybe that was one of the reasons that the people here in this area wanted their own church, instead of having either St. Philip's or Ecclesfield. The place was being rebuilt. There were houses being built all along what you would now call this side of the road, where it's all commercial. Many houses were being built round about that time, so they needed and they wanted their own place of worship. And this church from there has gone on to fulfill that road. In those days, as I've said, it was only a few years after the disaster. But down the years, as we've come from 1874, there have been extensions, alterations, things added that we never realised that you would have thought would have been here right at the beginning, like the east window. It was kind of 30-odd years before that was put in, beautiful as it is. And so things changed. The work of God went on. Things happened, extensions, alterations to keep the work relevant with the times. Electric lights, a kitchen of sorts. Many lives have been touched by this place, or the preaching of the gospel in this place. Whether it be a baptism, a wedding, or a funeral, this place has played a part. The work in this place, in its many guises, evokes memories for so many people. Often we have, even this week I was here meeting some guys about the electric meter, and a couple walked in. And he said, I've lived in Stannington all my life, but I've never been down this end of the Sheffield, this end of the valley before. And he came in with his girlfriend or wife, had a wander around, and then wandered off up towards Ward's End. All this standing on a cornerstone laid by Montague Burgoyne. But you know, the one thing that's missing today in St. John's, the one thing that's missing today is that cornerstone. We don't know where it is. It was the foundation. It was the thing that this was built on. But eventually, it obviously became of no importance. So it's either been hidden or been taken out. But no longer is that foundation stone here. It's been forgotten. It's probably still here. But you go and look for it, as I have many times. As the church has grown and got very rich in so many ways, in its work, in its people, and the way God has looked after his people, that the stone, the foundation, is no longer in evidence. Moses says, don't you forget God. It's a warning, as true today as it was then. And what about today? Let's come up to 2026. What about us? What are we doing with the riches that God has allowed us to have and to look after? Isn't it true that having and holding those riches sometimes come before Christ? How often has God come to the rescue in many ways for each and every one of us, as individuals, as groups, as a church? Miracles, and yet we forget them. Just to put in here, a great God story that I remember from a few years ago at St. John's. We had a youth group at that time, and in that group were a small group of young men who were really out for God, but in their own way they were absolutely crazy. And one day, one of the lads, he damaged his ankle, so they put him in a pot. But he's meeting up with his mates, and it so happens that they've decided they're going to sleep at the vicarage that night. So off they go to bed that night. They'd been worshipping God, actually, during the evening. I'm not sure whether it was just at the vicarage, could have been, whatever. And during the night, this lad with the pot on his leg said, "Oh, can't stand that, it itches." So they all got up and prayed. And they no more to do. They went down to the garage, got the vicar's saw, and took the pot off, praying that God was healing in this feeling that he'd got in his leg. Now his mother, this lad's mother, was a nurse. So when he rang up next morning and said to her, "Mother, can you bring me shoe and a sock?" she wasn't too pleased. And so when she'd got hold of him, dragged him up to Northern General, and they came out with 2 x-rays. One with a damaged ankle, one with an ankle that was perfect. True story. This place, through the ministry of this place. And that group of lads didn't forget God in that time of need. How often has God come to the rescues in the miraculous? But the question for each of us today, is my wealth, is my wallet, or my home, or my family, or is it the one who died on a cross for me? That is my foundation stone. What am I looking at today? I think the majority of us here today have at some time in their lives come to God in one way or another and asked Jesus to be that foundation. Forget the rubbish that's gone before. Let's start again and let's lay that foundation stone that is Jesus Christ. For many, it'll have been time and a place that you can vividly remember because it was such a transforming, changing moment in your life. For others, it will have been a passage of time. But no matter how and when, you'll know that Christ came into your life, he kept his promise, and life could never be the same again. Do you remember the beginning of that first love with Christ? Is it still there in your mind and in your heart? Yeah, where is it now? Is it still there, as vivid? Or have other things taken over? I remember the story of a vicar I was talking to once, and at the end of his service, he was stood at the back of the church, as you do, and a lady who was kind of stalwart in the church said, "Oh, Vicar, I've wanted a word with you." She said, "We're getting a new sofa." She says, and the old one's quite good. And we wondered if you'd like it for the church. And the vicar stood and he looked at her for a minute and he said, "This sofa you've got, is it good, really good condition?" She says, "Oh, it's got miles left in it, Vicar. It's got miles left on it." And so the vicar said, "Could I just suggest that you do those miles with your sofa and give your church the money you would spend on the new one. Needless to say, the sofa never arrived and the thing was never mentioned again. Billy Graham, I think most of you will have heard of him, the evangelist, once said this: "There's nothing wrong with men possessing riches. The problem comes when riches possess men." And I know even from my own life, there are times when you think, oh, if I just had that, or I just went there, or I just did this. The altar of God is where kings and paupers meet. There are no rich, there are no poor in God's kingdom. The rich man must put his riches upon the altar, and the poor man must put his need upon the altar. And with one voice, they both cry to God, "Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling." The question we all must answer is what or who is coming before God in your and my life today? Is the foundation of all we have and all we are still visible? Do we project Jesus in the world, or do we just hide it for a Sunday morning? Is the foundation of all we have still visible? Pray not because you need something, but because you have everything, and be grateful. On a Sunday morning, do we come to church or do we come to God? In Joshua chapter 24 and verse 15, there's a pivotal biblical ultimatum from Joshua to the Israelites. Who will you serve today? Is it going to be the things of the world or the things of God? Or are you going to return to that foundation stone and once again get on that solid journey? Joshua said, "Choose you today who you will serve. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Could I ask the band to come back, please? And we're going to sing a song called "Christ is Enough." And one of the verses is this: "Christ is enough for me, Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you, everything I need. I've decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I've decided to follow Jesus. No turning back." If maybe for the first time this morning you've heard about this foundation that is Jesus Christ, as we stand to sing, would you commit your life to Jesus? If you've been a Christian many years, would you like to take a look at where you are and whether you need to move back to that real foundation that gave you what you are, who gave you what you have and made you who you are, and ask him to make you who he wants you to be? Let's stand together if we can and join in this song.